This week was almost a disaster, because I didn't have that much time to begin with, and I spent a lot of it on another project that I intended to have as a secondary one, to chip away at whenever I didn't really feel like working on this, so I can still be productive while technically speaking procrastinating. The issue arose from the fact that this week I was inspired to work on that other project, and it was only on late Saturday when I realized that if I don't immediately focus on the Copper-9 combat engine, this devlog will be a grand total of 2 minutes long. But as you can see, it's not. So let's get into what I managed to do. For starters, I made sprites for Uzi and V for the recreation of their episode 4 fight, which led me to focus on mechanics relating to these sprites. For one, walk cycles. Cardinal Quest, and for that matter most similar games, don't actually have any sprite animation at all, the movement being just a simple hop when the sprite moves to the next tile on a small curve. And that is what I initially did and planned to keep even as I started designing the system for having the characters change poses, as I described in the last devlog. But then I saw this part of episode 4 again, a steady shot with V fully visible, walking forward, way too convenient not to use. So I decided that I could have a primitive walk cycle, simply alternating between 2 sprites for every step. Unfortunately, I can't show it in the game yet, because well, I only have these sprites for V, and V currently happens to be just a reskinned training dummy with no AI to speak of. So maybe in the next devlog I'll do something about that, or make the walk sprites for Solver Uzi. I've also made some fixes which were still necessary to make 3D work as intended, because the units were turning the wrong way after attacking if the camera was rotated, and the change in the facing direction of sprites didn't account for the current direction from which the camera was looking, since the sprites are meant to flip when walking left or right from the camera's perspective, but the way I initially implemented it was reacting to them moving left and right as seen from the 2D camera. And I have taken a couple of big steps towards having a functional limb system, which ended up evolving into a more general segment system, where all objects can have specific segments that you can attack, sever and destroy. For now it is only implemented on V, but eventually every unit and many objects will have these segments, though there will be a slight difference in how they function. Both have one segment defined as the root, being one to which other segments are attached. Regular objects pass all the damage they take to the root, and if it is destroyed, the object itself is destroyed, its other segments dropping to that tile. And while units are also killed if their root is destroyed, they have their own HP, which if reduced to 0, causes them to die, becoming a regular object. This implementation is mostly for the sake of planning ahead. I can't think of a fight where a killed drone is used in any way, but if this will be a proper fun game eventually, and if you will be able to play as a disassembly drone, both of these being things that I would like to see, you should have the bodies that you can drain oil out of or bring back to build a spire, things like that. I don't know yet if I will need a system for segments attached to other segments, though thinking about it now, it might be inevitable, for stuff like V ripping out Jay's hand in episode 8, or again, planning ahead for making this a proper game, a situation where you might want to attack a specific segment of the centipede form of an absolute solver possessed drone. Once I had the segment system itself implemented, it was relatively easy to implement an ability effect that severs them, and of course one that lets you aim precisely for any part of their opponent, which due to how destroying and severing limbs work, will be a really powerful ability, and as such I plan on restricting the access to it. Most of the time you will only be able to use it one attack at a time, after taking a turn to aim or something along those lines. Only in extreme cases, such as being overtaken by the solver and being let loose to wreak havoc, you would be given a buff that lets you precisely aim all of your attacks. And just to test these mechanics, I implemented debug attacks which can sever or destroy any segment of any unit on the map, which you can see in the background. And then it took me longer than it should to make it possible to pick up limbs, as well as all small objects, not just items. Again, it's not something absolutely necessary, since in the case of something like this arm in the episode 4 fight, the arm itself is destroyed, and just the blade is used, which in my implementation will be treated not as a limb but as a weapon. But it is a detail that didn't take that long in the grand scheme of things, and for the gameplay it will just feel right. Of course, to have all this work, I had to split the sprite into individual limbs, including filling them out wherever they were obscured by another limb, and it will be something that will need a lot of refining in the future. Not to mention the fact that since I'll have to build every pose of every unit out of these pieces, I'll need to devise a system to save and store poses defined this way, and possibly something that would make the workflow for it as convenient as possible. Oh, worth noting that for now, severing the limbs is purely visual. I am focusing on getting stuff ready for the first fight recreation, and there the only consequences of V losing an arm are the blade from it being used as a weapon, which I have already implemented in the form of a loot list for every object, which defines what it drops when destroyed, and obviously V not using that arm to fight, which can be simply built into the sequence. And it will probably remain that way until I get to one of the fights where someone loses their head or leg, since those would have immediate effects. And that's all I have for this week. I'm quite happy with the progress I've made. It feels like I might actually be able to recreate that first fight before December. So thanks for watching, consider doing the YouTube things, and I'll see you in the next devlog. Until then, farewell.